Thank you. Good afternoon. As mentioned, my name is Felix Villalobos. I am an immigration attorney with Raices. And this afternoon, we're going to be giving a presentation on general information about knowing your rights and legal options. Okay, so the agenda, and there is quite a bit, so I may go a little bit fast. First, we're going to talk about what your rights actually are at home when the police comes or at home when immigration comes. We're also going to talk about what to do if that happens at work or while you're driving. And then after that, I will go a little bit into legal options and talk a little bit about some things to consider. So first, let's talk about constitutional rights. Many people believe that their constitutional rights are based on their immigration status or where they are born, but the constitutional rights to everybody are the same. Everybody has the right to remain silent, the right to see a warrant when somebody says that they have a warrant for an arrest, and the right to an attorney. Now, along with that, many times there are a lot of police and cop shows out there, and you'll hear a lot of interesting things in social media as well. One thing that is not a right, and the Supreme Court has stated so, is that the police and immigration can lie or say certain things to try and get you to confess or say certain things. So it is not a right that the police and ICE has to be honest with you. They are allowed to tell you certain things if they believe that telling you those things will get information out of you. So let's talk about your rights at home first. Next slide, please. All right, so police comes knocking at your door and you believe it's the police. How does that work? So normally when a police officer is coming to arrest a person, they usually are going to have what's called a warrant for an arrest. A warrant is usually signed by a judge, and the police officer must have a reasonable belief that the person they're looking for lives at the place that they are showing up with the warrant. If that is what happens, if the police knocks on your door and the person for whom they have a warrant for actually does live there, then you may need to let them in. If the officer does not have a warrant and they don't have a reason to believe that that person is there, you may not have to let them in. It may be your choice on whether you want to speak to them through the door and explain that to them. There is a third situation where if the police don't have a warrant, but there is something called exigent circumstances, meaning that there's an urgency or that they believe that somebody's in danger, you may have to let them in at that time. But the general rule is if they have a warrant and the person lives there, you may have to let them in. If not, you may not have to let them in. Now, immigration is a little bit different. So with immigration, they also have to have a warrant. It has to be signed by a judge, and it also has to have the correct name of the person that they are looking for. Now, when immigration comes to a door to execute a warrant, they can't just knock down the door. They just can't walk in. They have to be allowed in, meaning you have to open the door. So the first thing to explain is that don't open the door. If you hear somebody saying, this is ICE, we have a warrant for so-and-so person's arrest, the thing to do is to ask for them to put the warrant through underneath the door so you can look at it yourself, so you can see, is it a warrant? Is it signed by a judge? Does it have the correct name? If they can't do that, then you can tell them, you know what, you can't fit it underneath the door. Put it up on the window. I want to see this warrant. Again, do not open the door. If you open the door, you are inviting them in. They can walk in. If the person does not live there, or if the warrant is not signed by a judge, you don't have to talk to them. You can tell them that you're not going to open the door, and you just continue. You stop speaking with them. Now, if the warrant is signed by a judge, and the person is there, then you're going to have to let them in. But what I normally recommend is that before you open the door, if the warrant is signed by a judge and the person is there, is that you tell everybody in the home, hey, ICE has a warrant, they're about to come in, and then remember your constitutional rights. Remain silent, ask for an attorney. Now, what do you do if there's an ICE raid or if immigration comes to where you work? The first thing to understand is that when ICE raids a company, they're usually targeting the company and or the workers. Many times people believe that if there's an ICE raid, they're only looking for workers, but many times they're looking for the company. It may have been that somebody reported the company that they're hiring people without legal status, or that they're not keeping the proper paperwork. And companies get fined thousands of dollars per infraction for these kind of situations. And so when there is going to be an ICE raid, usually before that, ICE will do what's called an audit. And you can picture an income tax audit from the IRS. It's very similar. ICE comes down, takes a bunch of documents, then they'll come over, and then they may eventually do an ICE raid. So if while you're at work, there is an ICE raid, if you have legal status, meaning you're a US citizen, you're a legal permanent resident, you have a work permit, it is your option if you want to give them your name and show them your ID. But you don't have to if you don't want to. Again, you have the right to remain silent and speak to an attorney. If you do not have legal status, the important thing to know is that it may be important for you to remain silent, because immigration generally may not have any information on you. Any information they get is anything that you confess or provide to them. You can ask them that if you're being detained or not. If you say you're not being detained, then walk away, leave. If they do detain you, then you want to speak to your family when they give you your phone call so that they can call an immigration attorney and help you out. Now, if you're detained while in the street or while driving, sometimes ICE will set up roadblocks or may set up certain situations where they'll wait outside for somebody to leave their home. In those kind of situations, it's a little bit different if it's a police officer or immigration. So if it's immigration, it's very similar to the door approach. You want to ask for the warrant. You want to see if it's signed by a judge, and you want to see if it's really your name. If it's not, then you want to return that to them. So that's not me, may I leave? You don't want to be giving any information. You don't want to answer any other questions. If it's a police officer that stops you, that's a little bit different, because under the law, a police officer can ask you for some kind of ID or driver's license. If you're driving, they can ask for proof of insurance and a registration. If you decline to provide those documents or you don't have them, they can give you a ticket. If the police officer believes that you don't have legal status, then they can call immigration and hold you until immigration arrives. Great, so that's the part on constitutional rights. Now I want to spend a little bit of time talking about legal options that may be available to you or to somebody else. And I will say that if you don't know what your legal options are, I definitely recommend that you speak with an immigration attorney so you can understand your legal options, cost, what is required as far as information and documents, and also the probability of actually being approved for that document. Next slide, please. Along with that, you want to be careful to not seek out the wrong kind of assistance. You don't want to be using what's called a public notary or a notario to help you with immigration legal applications. Notarios in Latin American countries are usually attorneys that do something extra to become certified as notarios or notaries. But here in the United States, it's not like that at all. Anybody can become a public notary. It's about $100, and you become a notary for a couple of years. A public notary in the United States is a person that can verify that you are who you say you are when you are signing a document. That's about it. They're not attorneys. They don't have any legal training. If they help you out with any legal processes and they don't work out, they can't go to immigration court with you. They may not be able to fix it. If you are ever a victim of a notario, there are phone numbers that you can reach out to. The government takes that pretty seriously. And one of the first sections that I want to talk about is naturalization, or becoming a US citizen. Becoming a U.S. citizen has many benefits to it. Some are that you get the opportunity to vote. If you are a U.S. citizen, the government cannot try and deport you in the United States. And if you have families that you can petition for as a U.S. citizen, usually that process is a little bit easier than if you're not. But to apply for naturalization, you must be at least 18 years of age. You have to be a permanent resident. You must have been living in your residence for at least 3 months before you apply. You have to be physically present in the United States for a certain amount of time. That can be either 5 years or 3 years, depending on how you obtained your residency. You have to show that you have good moral character. For many people, they will be required to take a civics test and an English test, unless you can show that you have been a resident for at least 15 or 20 years, which in that case, you may be able to take the citizenship exam in your language, or you may be able to skip the English exam as well. One question that we get very often is whether a person can be petitioned by a family member. So family petitions, I've listed here who can petition who. As you can see, a U.S. citizen can petition more family members than a legal permanent resident can. And a U.S. citizen typically can, the process may be a little bit faster than for a legal permanent resident. But as you can see, the categories, it's very important if you believe that you can be petitioned or that you may be able to petition somebody else, definitely speak to an immigration attorney so you can understand your options. Another area that I'd like to cover, because many people may not have heard of, are humanitarian visas. These are visas that the government provides for persons to be able to stay in the United States and gain legal status depending on their situation. The S visa is for a person that has assisted the federal government in investigations. The T visa is for those that have been trafficked to the United States against their will or forced to work in horrible conditions. The U visa, which is probably the one that people tend to hear about the most, is a visa for those that are victims of a crime in the United States. The crime is reported and they assist the police or the district attorney in the case. And lastly is VAWA, which is a visa for those that are married to a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident, and they're abused by their spouse, their child, or a U.S. citizen parent. All of these take a little bit of time to process, but at the end of it, you are able to obtain a legal permanent residence, and sometimes for your family members as well. Meaning, if you're married, for like a U and a T and an S, you can include your spouse and your children. You may also have heard about DACA, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which is a temporary status for those that were brought to the United States as children. At this time, people are still eligible to apply for the first time or to renew their DACA. Unfortunately, for those that are applying for their first time, because of a Texas case, those are on pause and the government isn't making decisions on them, but you can still apply. To apply for DACA, you can see here the requirements. You have to show that you came to the United States before you were 16, that you've been in the United States since 2007, that you either graduated from school or are still attending school, and that you don't have a major criminal history. Although DACA is not a legal permanent status, it is a way to get what's called deferred action, meaning that the government won't try and deport you unless there's a major criminal history, and you're able to get a work permit, which allows you to get your Social Security card and a driver's license. It's very common for people to ask us about business visas. For example, somebody will tell us, I've been working for my employer for about 5, 10, 15 years. They really like the work I do, and they told me that they would like to help me stay in the United States. Can that company petition me? And I will tell you that there are many different kinds of business visas, anything from a person that does basic labor work to a CEO. But they're all very different, and they don't all lead to a green card. Some of them are only temporary. Also, most of them require you to be petitioned by a company while you're in your home country and not in the United States. So that usually is the issue for a person where a company wants to petition them. If that person has been in the United States for more than 6 months without any legal status, that usually is a problem and cannot be petitioned by that company. And so that's usually the routine we've seen. But if there is a person that may be petitioned, the companies will actually hire an immigration attorney to do most of that work for you. Another area that I'd like to touch upon is the immigration court, or those that may be in removal proceedings. What that means is that you have appointments in front of an immigration judge in immigration court where the government is actively trying to deport you. If you are in immigration court, if you have an immigration hearing, it's very important that you understand what is happening and that you obtain representation so that you can understand all your rights and your options. It's also very important that if you are in immigration court, that you don't miss any hearings, because if you miss a hearing, they will actually issue a removal order, and that is really hard to get rid of. So if you are in immigration proceedings, get an attorney, understand your situation and your legal options. Don't take your time finding an attorney because you need one right away. I will say though, in general, these cases are taking quite a bit of time because of COVID, because there's quite a bit of a backlog, but you definitely don't want to miss any hearings. And I'm providing a couple of resources here. USCIS, which is the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. USCIS is the one that publishes all the immigration forms for free online and provides the instructions on how to do it if you have a simple case, and gives you all the information on where to mail it, the fees, and any other information you may need. The first link is to Raíces. That's our website that has information about all kinds of things and ways to get involved, and also about our locations and offices and information on consultations. I want to thank you for your time, and we like sharing this information with everybody because we always find somebody that doesn't know the basic information. It's great to listen to the news. It's great to listen to your neighbor that maybe went through it, but if in doubt, always speak with an immigration attorney to understand your individual situation. Thank you.